Hi again then guys, and welcome to another specific look at of course, specific bike from the first ride game. And this is a follow-on, in a funny kind of way, to a review that we already did of the older sibling of this lineage of Bimotas. For those who don't know, Bimota is my favourite motorcycle brand. Their livery of the red and white and black directly inspired the colours and the livery of this channel as my homage to them. And this bike series, as I talked about in my review for the Tesi 1D, the first generation, or close enough, I found these bikes to be groundbreakingly surprising to me. Literally, not just in terms of how I felt about them, but in terms of their tech as well. They're incredible bikes from a technological standpoint because they're not just fast, pretty superbikes, which is what most Italian bikes are. Ducatis, Aprilias, Bimotas, whatever. But no, the Tesi is something that tries to be different and actually succeeds, which for a company who doesn't have the massive backing that some others do, that's actually impressive that they pulled it off so well. Now, the main reason why I wasn't as interested in the lineup of the Tesi range, be it the first one, this one, is because I'm just not a huge fan of the look of the front suspension. The swingarm style is of course the signature of the bike, but I must admit the payoffs in terms of performance that design gives you more than makes up for any kind of personal opinion about the looks. Now, I must admit as well, the looks are growing on me. The more I use the bike, the more I enjoy it. But this one is, funnily enough, very different to the 1D. Because if you've seen that review and seen the bike, of course you will have noticed that it's much more of a sport bike in its appearance. It's got a full fairing, it looks like a super bike. Basically everything about it looks like a typical sport bike, except for the swing arm suspension. That makes it stand out a lot from stuff like the YB6s, the SB11s, whatever. This one, on the other hand, it's very different, because this is much more of a naked city bike with that same kind of suspension design. And initially I didn't like that because I'm not a fan of city bikes. I don't like bikes that don't have a fairing. I know a lot of people love them for the more raw experience that they give you. They're easier to work on, easier to modify. It's just not me. I just prefer full-faired superbikes. That's just the kind of rider that I would be, that I am in a game. So this one doesn't inherently appeal to me. That was, however, until I rode it. Because this bike, the Tesi 3D, the more standard version, there are a couple, it's amazing. It's an incredible bike because it doesn't have the sheer power or the torque or even amazing performance for top speed that many of the other bikes that we've looked at do. The top end speed in this video is only around 130 miles per hour. The bike itself has less than 100 horsepower. It's actually 98. It has 69 pound-feet of torque. The engine is basically 1100. It's a 1078cc twin cylinder, and it's got this fancy weirdo alien looking suspension setup. So what's the big deal? Why am I reviewing it at all? Well, the reason why is, for those who haven't seen the other review, the same brilliance applies to the suspension of this bike, because the great thing is it's not just oddball looking for the sake of it as a gimmick. I don't hate gimmicks, but I love them even more when they actually have a practical benefit and a use. And this definitely does, because having the suspension set up in this way, just like the 1D does also, it actually makes the bike handle much more differently. For instance, it does not lunge under braking anywhere near as much as a traditional bike. And you can actually see in the video when I brake for corners, when I give it the throttle out of a corner, the bike doesn't rock back and forth under power or under braking like a normal bike would. Because of course you get something like a Bimota DB5 or a DB8 or whatever, when you brake the front end goes down. Of course, sometimes if you brake too hard you can pull a stoppie. When you give it the power out of a corner you can quite easily wheelie, you'll see the suspension moving around as it should. With this bike that doesn't happen. You can slam on the brakes and it feels totally controlled. Even through a corner I found that you could actually give it full power and it's much more controlled. Now of course, full power in this bike is like half the power of a lot of traditional superbikes, but at the same time it's not slow through corners. The acceleration is still great, and that's partially due to the fact that this bike is not heavy at all. It only weighs 167 kilos, which is lighter than a Yamaha R1. Now given that this has an even bigger engine than that, that's not bad. It's not bad at all. And even the appearance I did definitely find grew on me, because when you look at the bike, especially from the front, as it's bearing down on you, it's got this very unique appearance of a super small, compact, narrow front end with a tiny windshield. The handlebars look super close together, almost like old school cafe racer style, but then from the side you've got these almost comically oversized looking wheels in comparison to the rest of the bike, which gives it a very almost caricatured-esque design from some angles, but it works. It looks kind of like a hot rod, I think, but in a really good way, with that Bimota beauty and oddball style to it, which is why I love them so much. Just like Maserati with cars, they're my favourite manufacturer when it comes to cars for the same reason. They're different and they're not afraid of it. Now, in terms of pricing, it's a Bimota, so of course it's not going to be cheap. This is a 37,000 credit bike, and in the long run it's not the most useful thing around, because it can't really take on a superbike in terms of power, even in its engine size. Again, it doesn't have the power, doesn't have the torque, certainly doesn't have the top end speed, but for a city bike, for bikes which are more experimental in nature or different from the norm, it's actually really good for that, because it gives you the kind of control, the kind of handling of its own weight that you would expect from a much more powerful, certainly a much faster, track-focused machine. I would actually say that undoubtedly this and the 1D, which we reviewed way back, are actually among the best handling bikes I've driven or ridden in the game. They really are that good. So if you do get the chance to pick up one of them, well, I might recommend the original in terms of its overall package, the appearance as well, but at the same time this is a much cheaper bike and it's a faster one overall, because even though it doesn't have the same kind of power, it is lighter than the older model and it definitely feels faster through corners. The handling is by far the best thing about this bike, with I would say the unique appearance coming in probably a close second. But it's definitely worth checking out, and even if someone like me who's a fan of the brand didn't like the bike, it is totally understandable why some people would never ride one, because it just looks weird and gimmicky and oddball for the sake of it. Trust me, it isn't. Try this bike, you will be very pleasantly surprised by just how good it feels. You will become addicted to the handling. But that's it for this pick. Of course, I'll see you guys next time, and for now, as always, thanks for watching.